Paul, you want to talk about how Bernie Sanders is actually doing pretty good, all things considered? Hint, hint, fingers crossed, all those. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, yes, Bernie Sanders, we know him, we love him. He's doing well. He's surging in the polls. This particular article wanted to focus on some parallels with a particularly historical movement. So go back to 1968, and in New Hampshire, it was really young people that came out to campaign for Democratic Senator Eugene McCarthy, to the point where it got Lyndon Johnson to actually not even run for re-election at all. Something somewhat similar is happening this time around. Like, there certainly is a lot of youth support for Bernie Sanders, and that's sort of ballooning into other areas, right? I mean, I saw polls today that were starting to show that nationwide, Bernie is starting to win even amongst older voters in the 45 to 55, I think was the category I was looking at. He's surging in as well. But there were a couple of things they wanted to point out here. So the Bernie Sanders movement, as it is manifesting in New Hampshire, is getting a lot of support from the New Hampshire youth movement, which leadership calls, quote, the largest youth power organization in the state. They endorsed Sanders last week. The New Hampshire youth movement could provide a margin of victory to New Hampshire's February 11th primary, and the strategy has been methodical. Quote, people involved with the NHYM have been canvassing nonstop, the state director of the organization's field program, Dylan Carney, told me. We've gathered over 9,500 pledge to vote cards from people aged 18 to 25, and we'll be working to get them voting for Bernie Sanders on February 11th. So a couple of things that are worth pointing out about this. One of the members of the movement pointed out that Sanders is a movement candidate. Who will be accountable for our generation? He has proven that he is aligned with the vision of the world that we want to create. And since our generation was born, he was fighting the injustices that we are fighting today. So there are a couple of obvious things. If you look at the charter for the New Hampshire youth movement, you see that there's a lot of confluence of interest already with Bernie's movement. So, you know, scientists tell us we have less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage of climate crisis. Everyone deserves access to quality health care regardless of their ability to pay. People across the country are drowning in medical debt. Students and alumni are drowning in debt while private loan providers are making obscene amounts of money. Providing free college for all would be a massive investment in our workforce and our economy. These are the kinds of things that the youth in New Hampshire are fighting for, and they're out there daily canvassing for Bernie Sanders. And we're seeing it in polling results coming out. And I wanted to mention, we're also seeing it in a lot of the other stories that we end up covering even here on this show. And it manifests as sort of, what's the old adage? First they ignore you, then they mock you, then you win. Then first they ignore you, then they mock you, then they fight you, then you win.
Then you win by winning.
You win by winning. They're on to fighting. I mean, we've gotten past the ignoring, we've gotten past the mocking. And now, oh my God, Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders. Oh, let's all be outraged about this thing that no one is outraged about. Oh, he said something untoward 65 years ago. Let's all get mad about some other random thing. Hey, somebody else endorsed them we don't like. You know what we need to do? We need to put a bunch of people on the rules committee that make sure that Bernie Sanders doesn't get in. We need to have this voting app in the caucuses. They're just, every little thing is going on now. It's a mad scramble to make sure that Bernie Sanders cannot win the nomination. And we were talking just before the show. It was actually Jose, you had a really interesting theory about what we might see once the primaries start happening. Like, what happens if Bernie wins both Iowa and New Hampshire? Why don't you go into that?
You know, because there's a lot of what you're mentioning is even happening in real time in Iowa, where people that are set to caucus and have caucused in Iowa before are having their locations changed on the fly, and that's totally right within the rules. They can change the locations, you know, hours before. There's a lot of moves like this to slow Bernie down, because I don't think there's any way to prevent him actually winning the first two states. You know, people door knocking in Iowa, people that are on the ground, seeing a lot of energy the media's not talking about. Feel pretty confident Bernie will win Iowa. He's looking good in New Hampshire, but if they can cut down his numbers even a bit, a few percentage points, it all comes down to delegate count. And I think we might start seeing the media just be very upfront and open about Bernie doesn't have the delegates to win in the first round. So, and they're going to try to do this to demur people's energy and people's enthusiasm on the Super Tuesday vote, you know, to make sure that he doesn't have the 50% of the delegates to just win outright in the first round.
Yeah, and here's the thing that there's two factors into this. There's the do you have enough delegates? But there's another aspect of this that will come into play in a very big way. And again, and we were talking also before the show how this is ironically happening in a very similar way to how Trump became president in 2016, and how it's actually very close. It's like, you know, an anti-establishment person with like a few people surrounding them and like 1,000 establishment people in the race. And that's kind of where we're at with Sanders. There's the average establishment person is stronger than the average Republican was, so they kind of balance themselves out. But Bernie Sanders is, again, and the media, again, like every single election, they've been like, oh, whoever wins the first 2 states goes on to win the presidency. And that's what everything. I'm excited to see how fast they decide to go, oh, well, let's not ever mention that ever again. But the point I was trying to make was that even if Sanders only gets 30 or 40% of the vote in these states, if he wins 90% of the states, that's a whole nother set of calculus, because then you could make the very strong argument that, again, it's this goes back to what I've been saying. It's bigger army diplomacy at the end. The DNC is going to be like, oh, we're going to do an app that maybe we can swing 1% or 2% of people from voting over here. Oh, we're going to stack the rules committee that if it's a certain closeness, because if Bernie Sanders gets like 45% of the pledged delegates, Again, I would consider that big army diplomacy. It wouldn't matter. He would still get in. It's more like we're talking like if he's at like, I don't know, 40%, 38%, that's when that's when that really comes in. But again,
I think they'll try it either way.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I'm saying, will it work? Will it carry through? Will it be effective? And that's where we have to be. We have to overwin. We have to overwin no matter what. We have to win by winning. We have to win the first 2 states. Then we have to win the third. Then we have to try our best to win South Carolina. Then in Super Tuesday comes, we have to win California. We have to win the other states
Nevada.
there. And so if we're at a spot by Super Tuesday that Sanders has won 75 or 80%, because the thing is, and Paul, you've made this point a lot, and I think it actually is most advantageous to Bernie Sanders, is that there's a lot of people that will just vote for who they think is the winner or who is going to be the winner. And if Sanders wins, and a lot of those people, I would say, aren't Bernie supporters. Bernie supporters are Bernie supporters because they're Bernie supporters. Biden supporters are Biden supporters because they're like, I think he can win. Woo, I like voting for the winner.
He was Obama's VP.
So if Sanders is winning 75% of the states, and again, all this snowballs on itself.
Yeah, I wanted to point out also, Kyle Kalinske has been making a point on his show that I think is really, really smart and really, really prudent, and that is we can't congratulate ourselves before this race is over. Sort of it ain't over till it's over kind of argument, and that is if we're polling at 35%, we got to pretend like we're polling at 20% and fight for every little bit. We got to pretend like our back is always against the wall, because the reality is when you take the totality of the number of ways that Bernie will be cheated, that the scales will be tipped against him, our back is against the wall. And so fight like hell.
I mean, just to point out, no one 4 years ago, the establishment and a lot of even Bernie supporters did not envision him being this far where he's at right now. So we are playing with, a dynamic where the establishment is taken by surprise, but has every conceivable advantage to try to stop us.
In summary, don't lose hope. Believe you can win, but only believe you can win if you put 110% of your effort behind this.